That's how it started. Not with a bang, not with screaming, but with Vanessa standing in our bedroom doorway holding a Victoria's Secret bag like it was a declaration of war. 20 years of marriage, and I'd never heard her say "for myself" with quite that tone before. My name's Alex Foster, and I'm 44 years old. I've been a senior civil engineer at Meridian Construction for 15 years, building bridges that last decades and fixing problems that would make most people's heads spin. I thought I was pretty good at spotting structural weaknesses. Turns out, I'd been living with one for months. "That's nice, Van," I said, not looking up from my laptop. I was reviewing blueprints for a highway overpass project, the kind of work that actually mattered. "Special occasion?" She laughed. Not her usual laugh. This one had an edge to it, like glass breaking in slow motion. "Does a woman need a special occasion to feel attractive?" I should have paid attention to that laugh. Should have noticed how she'd been working late 3 nights a week for the past 2 months. Should have wondered why she suddenly needed a new phone with a privacy screen protector. Should have asked about the Uber receipts I'd been finding in her purse. But I didn't. Because after 20 years, you assume the foundation is solid. "Of course not," I said, finally looking up. She was leaning against the door frame, and I had to admit she looked good. Vanessa had always been attractive. Auburn hair, green eyes, the kind of smile that could sell ice to penguins. At 42, she still turned heads. "You always look beautiful." She rolled her eyes. "When's the last time you really looked at me, Alex? I mean, really looked?" I closed the laptop. Here we go, I thought. The conversation I'd been dreading, but somehow expecting. "I'm looking now." "Are you?" "Because lately I feel invisible, like I'm just part of the furniture in this house." I stood up, walked over to her. She smelled different. New perfume, something expensive and unfamiliar. "Van, what's this about?" She moved away from my touch. "It's about feeling alive again. It's about remembering what it's like to be desired, not just convenient." "Convenient?" The word hit harder than I expected. "Is that what I am to you?" "No, Alex. That's what I am to you." She sat on the edge of our bed, the Victoria's Secret bag crinkling in her lap. "When's the last time we went anywhere together? When's the last time you surprised me? When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about work or bills or whose turn it is to take out the garbage?" She had a point. I'd been buried in work, taking on extra projects, building our retirement fund. I thought I was being responsible. Apparently, I was being boring. "Okay," I said. "You're right. We should do something. Plan a trip, go out more. It's too late for that." The words hung in the air like smoke. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "What do you mean, too late?" Vanessa looked at me with something that might have been pity. "I mean, I've already started living again. And it doesn't include you." I sat down heavily in the chair by the window. Outside, our neighbor Mike was mowing his lawn, probably thinking about dinner or weekend plans, or any of the 1,000 normal things that normal husbands in normal marriages think about on a Thursday evening. "There's someone else," I said. It wasn't a question. "Not someone else. Someone's else." She stood up, smoothing down her skirt. "I want to see other men, Alex. I want to remember what it feels like to be pursued, to be wanted, to be chosen. You were chosen. I chose you. 20 years ago, I chose you. And then you stopped choosing me every day after that." I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Because maybe she was right. Maybe I had gotten comfortable. Maybe I had taken her for granted. "So what are you saying? You want a divorce?" She shook her head. "I'm saying I want to live. I'm saying I want to go on dates. I'm saying I want to feel attractive and desired and alive again. While married to me. While figuring out what I want." I stood up, paced to the window. Mike had finished his lawn and was putting the mower away. His wife came out with 2 beers, and they sat on their porch swing together. It looked so simple, so easy. "Who is he?" I asked. Who's who? Don't play games, Van. You didn't wake up this morning and suddenly decide you wanted to date multiple men. There's someone specific, someone who's been telling you how attractive and alive you are. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, Brett Lane. Brett Lane, her boss, regional director at Meridian Construction, my company. The guy who drove a Range Rover and wore suits that cost more than most people's monthly rent. The guy who was also married, with 2 kids in private school. Your boss, I said. Yes. My boss. Your boss's boss, technically. And he wants to date you. He wants to take me to dinner tomorrow night. I turned around. She was standing straighter now, chin up, defiant, like she'd been practicing this conversation in the mirror. And you said yes. I said I'd think about it. But you've already decided. She nodded. I walked past her, out of the bedroom, down the stairs to the kitchen. I needed water or whiskey, or maybe just some distance from the woman who'd just blown up my life with the casual tone most people use to discuss the weather. She followed me downstairs. Alex, this doesn't have to be the end of everything. People have open marriages. People figure out new ways to be happy. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Open marriages, right. And what do I get out of this arrangement? Do I get to date other women too? Or am I just supposed to sit home while you're out with Brett Lane? You can do whatever you want. What I want is my wife. What I want is the woman I married, who promised to forsake all others. That woman was dying, Alex. Slowly, quietly, but dying. This is me trying to live again. I poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon and drank half of it in one swallow. So you're going out with Brett tomorrow night? Yes. And after that? We'll see what happens. I finished the bourbon and set the glass down harder than necessary. Then we're done. Alex. No. We're done. You want to see other men? Fine. But you don't get to do it while married to me. You don't get to come home to our bed after being with him. You don't get to have it both ways. For the first time since this conversation started, she looked uncertain. You're being dramatic. I'm being clear. Go on your date with Brett. But understand that when you do, you're choosing him over me. Over us. Over 20 years of marriage. It's just dinner. Bullshit. I walked past her toward the stairs. It stopped being just dinner the moment you bought lingerie for yourself and told your husband you want to see other men. I went upstairs and started packing a bag. Not everything, just enough for a few days while I figured out what came next. She followed me, standing in the doorway again. Where are you going? Hotel. Maybe my sister's place. Doesn't matter. Alex, please, can't we talk about this like adults? I stopped packing and looked at her. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in months. She was beautiful, and she was a stranger, and she was about to become my ex-wife. We just did talk about it. You made your choice. I zipped up the bag and walked past her. At the top of the stairs, I turned back. One more thing. When you're out with Brett tomorrow night, remember that he's married too. Remember that he's got just as much to lose as you do. And remember that some bridges, once you burn them, can't be rebuilt. I left her standing there and walked out of the house we'd shared for 15 years. As I drove away, I could see her silhouette in the bedroom window, probably already texting Brett Lane to tell him she'd be available for dinner after all. That was Thursday night. By Friday evening, the whole company would be talking about Vanessa Foster's new relationship status. By Monday, I'd be planning my revenge. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that my marriage was over, and I had no idea what came next. I spent Friday night at the Hampton Inn on Route 40, staring at the ceiling and trying to figure out how 20 years of marriage had evaporated in a single conversation. By Saturday morning, I'd made 3 decisions. First, I wasn't going to beg. Second, I wasn't going to make this easy for her. Third, I was going to find out exactly what I was dealing with before I made my next move. My sister Rachel lived in Towson, about 20 minutes from our house in Lutherville. She was 2 years younger than me, twice divorced, and had the kind of sharp tongue that could cut glass. She also made the best coffee in Maryland and had never liked Vanessa. "I knew this was coming," she said, handing me a mug and settling into her kitchen chair. "I've been waiting for this call for 2 years." 2 years? "Alex, you're my brother, and I love you, but you're also oblivious. Vanessa's been checking out of your marriage since she turned 40. New clothes, new hairstyle, staying out later, being secretive with her phone. Classic midlife crisis behavior." I sipped the coffee. It was strong enough to wake the dead. "So why didn't you say anything?" "Would you have listened?" She had a point. I probably would have defended Vanessa, made excuses, told Rachel she was being paranoid. "So what's the plan?" she asked. "Plan? Alex, your wife just told you she's dating her boss. Your boss, at your company. You think this is going to stay quiet? You think this isn't going to affect your job, your reputation, your entire life?" I hadn't thought that far ahead. I'd been too busy feeling betrayed and humiliated to consider the practical implications. "I need information," I said. "You need a private investigator. I need to know what I'm up against before I decide how to handle this." Rachel pulled out her phone. "I know a guy, Tom Brennan, ex-Baltimore PD, does private work now, discretion guaranteed." "How do you know a private investigator?" "Divorce number 2. Don't ask." Tom Brennan looked exactly like what Central Casting would order for gruff ex-cop turned private eye. 50-something, gray hair, weathered face, and the kind of handshake that could crack walnuts. "We met at a diner in Cockeysville on Sunday morning." "So your wife's cheating with her boss," he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. "How long you been married?" 20 years. "Kids?" "No." "Joint assets?" "House, savings, retirement accounts, standard stuff." He nodded. "And you want to know what exactly?" "Everything. How long it's been going on. Whether there are others. Whether this is her first affair or just the first one she's told me about. What they're doing, where they're going, who knows about it. That's going to take some time, and it's going to cost you." "How much?" He named a figure that made me wince, but it was less than I'd probably lose in a divorce if I didn't have ammunition. "One more thing," I said. "They work at my company. I need to know if this is affecting my job, my reputation, whether people are talking." "Office affairs are messy," Tom said, "especially when one of them's the boss. People talk, take sides, make assumptions. You could be walking into a hostile work environment without even knowing it." By Monday morning, I had a plan. I'd moved into a furnished apartment in Hunt Valley, close enough to work but far enough from Lutherville that I wouldn't accidentally run into Vanessa at the grocery store. I'd transferred half our joint savings into a personal account, legally defensible since it was marital property, but enough to make sure she couldn't clean me out while I figured out my next move. And I'd started paying attention to the office dynamics I'd been oblivious to for months. Meridian Construction occupied 3 floors of a glass office building in Hunt Valley. I'd been there so long I barely noticed the gossip, the politics, the subtle alliances and rivalries that make up any workplace. But walking in Monday morning with fresh eyes, I saw everything differently. Karen from HR gave me a look that was part sympathy, part curiosity. Big Mike from security nodded at me with what seemed like approval. And when I passed Vanessa's office, I could hear her laughing, the same glass-breaking laugh she'd used on me Thursday night. I settled into my cubicle and tried to focus on work. I had a bridge inspection report due by Wednesday and a cost estimate for the Route 83 project that needed to be reviewed. Normal work, the kind of thing that had consumed my attention for 15 years. But every few minutes I'd hear Vanessa's voice from across the office, or see Brett Lane walking past my cubicle with his expensive suit and his smug smile, and I'd remember that my life had fundamentally changed. At lunch, I sat with my usual group, 3 other engineers who'd been at Meridian almost as long as I had. Dave, Steve, and Jim were all married, all in their 40s, all the kind of solid, reliable guys who formed the backbone of the company. So, Dave said, unwrapping his sandwich, heard you and Vanessa are having some problems. I looked up from my salad. Where'd you hear that? Lauren mentioned it to my wife at yoga class. Said Vanessa was exploring her options. Lauren, Vanessa's best friend, the one who'd been encouraging her to live her best life for the past year. Of course, she was spreading the news. We're separated, I said. Sorry, man, Steve said. That sucks. Yeah, well, these things happen. Jim leaned forward. Is it true she's dating Brett Lane? The question hung in the air like a challenge. I could lie, deflect, change the subject, or I could own the situation. Apparently. Jesus, Dave muttered. That's cold. Guy's married, Steve pointed out. Got kids. Not my problem, I said, though we all knew it was absolutely my problem. After lunch, I was walking past the break room when I heard voices inside. Female voices, talking in the hushed tones that usually meant gossip. I can't believe she actually did it, someone was saying. I told you she would. She's been talking about it for months. I recognized the voices, Lauren and Stacy, Vanessa's friends from the marketing department. But Brett Lane, her boss, Alex's boss? She said he's been flirting with her since the Christmas party, said he told her she was wasted on a guy like Alex. That's harsh, but true. I mean, when's the last time you saw Alex and Vanessa together at a company event? He's always working, never pays attention to her. She's been dying for someone to notice her. Still, 20 years of marriage, 20 years of being taken for granted. She deserves better. I backed away from the break room, my face burning. So this had been going on since Christmas. 4 months of planning, flirting, building up to Thursday night's announcement, and her friends had known all along. That evening, Tom called with his first report. They had dinner Friday night at the Prime Rib in Baltimore, he said. Expensive place, lots of wine, very cozy. He picked her up at her house, your house, in his Range Rover, dropped her off around midnight. Did they go inside? Yeah. He stayed about 2 hours. I felt something twist in my stomach. Okay. There's more. They're not being subtle about it. He had his hand on her back walking into the restaurant, held her hand during dinner. Anyone who saw them would know they're together. Who saw them? That's the thing. The Prime Rib is where a lot of business people go. I recognized at least 3 people from your industry while I was watching. This isn't going to stay secret. By Tuesday, it wasn't secret. I could feel the stares, the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, the careful way people talked to me. Like I was fragile, or contagious, or both. Brett Lane, meanwhile, seemed to be enjoying himself. He walked a little taller, smiled a little wider, and made a point of stopping by Vanessa's office more often than usual. He didn't say anything to me directly, but I could feel his satisfaction radiating across the office like heat from a furnace. Wednesday morning, I was reviewing blueprints when my phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Saw V and BL at Morton's last night. Thought you should know. A friend, Morton's. Another expensive restaurant, this one in downtown Baltimore. They weren't even trying to be discreet. I was still staring at the message when Dave appeared at my cubicle. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. Just tired, I said. Look, I don't know if this helps, but my wife says Lauren's been bragging about setting this whole thing up. Apparently, she's been telling Vanessa for months that she deserves better, that she should find someone who appreciates her. Lauren introduced them? Not introduced, but she's been encouraging the whole thing, telling Vanessa she's too good for you, that she should go after what she wants. I nodded, filing that information away. Lauren had always been a problem, the kind of friend who thrived on drama and encouraged other people's bad decisions. But knowing she'd been actively sabotaging my marriage added a new dimension to the situation. Thanks for telling me, I said. There's something else. Jim heard from someone in accounting that Brett's been using his expense account for these dinners. Company money. Now that was interesting. Meridian had strict policies about expense accounts, especially for personal use. If Brett was billing his dates with my wife to the company, that was a fireable offense. You sure about that? Jim's wife works in accounting. She's seen the receipts. I spent the rest of Wednesday thinking about expense accounts and company policies and the various ways a man could destroy his career over a woman who wasn't his wife. By Thursday, I had an idea. By Friday, I was ready to put it into action. But first, I wanted to see them together. I wanted to watch my wife of 20 years hold hands with another man. I wanted to feel the full weight of what she'd done to us. Tom called Thursday evening. They're going to the Rusty Scupper tomorrow night. 7 o'clock reservation. The Rusty Scupper. Waterfront restaurant in Baltimore. Romantic views of the harbor. The kind of place I should have been taking Vanessa myself. I'll be there, I said. Alex, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not going to make a scene. I just need to see it for myself. And then what? Then I'm going to destroy both of them. Friday evening found me sitting in my Honda Accord in the parking lot of the Rusty Scupper, watching Brett Lane's silver Range Rover pull up to the valet station. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was surveilling my own wife like some kind of stalker while she went on a date with my boss. Brett got out first, tossing his keys to the valet with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never worried about money. He was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and his hair was perfectly styled despite the October wind off the harbor. Then Vanessa stepped out of the passenger side, and I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. She was wearing a black dress I'd never seen before, something sleek and expensive that hugged her curves in all the right places. Her hair was styled differently, swept up in an elegant twist that showed off the diamond earrings I'd given her for our 15th anniversary. She looked beautiful, confident, and completely transformed. She looked like a woman in love. Brett offered her his arm, and they walked into the restaurant together. He leaned down to whisper something in her ear, and she laughed, that same glass-breaking laugh that had started this whole mess. But when she laughed with him, it sounded different, lighter, happier. I sat in the parking lot for another hour, watching other couples arrive for their Friday night dates. Normal couples who weren't cheating on their spouses or destroying 20-year marriages or using company expense accounts to fund their affairs. When I finally drove home to my empty apartment, I had a voicemail from Tom. They went inside around 7:15, very affectionate, lots of touching and laughing. He ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than most people make in a day. They're definitely sleeping together, you can tell by the body language. And Alex? He paid with a company credit card. I got photos. I poured myself a bourbon and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop. Time to do some research. Meridian Construction's employee handbook was very clear about expense account usage, business meals only, with detailed receipts and justification required for any expenditure over $50. Personal use of company funds was grounds for immediate termination. I'd been with the company long enough to know that Brett Lane had been pushing the boundaries for years. Expensive lunches that were supposedly client meetings, hotel stays that seemed unnecessary, dinners that were questionably business-related. But he was a regional director. He brought in big contracts, and nobody wanted to ask too many questions. Until now. I spent Saturday morning going through my own files, looking for patterns. Brett's expense reports, which I'd had to review as part of various project budgets. The receipts were all there. Morton's, the Prime Rib, the Rusty Scupper, and half a dozen other expensive restaurants over the past 4 months. All billed as client entertainment or business development. The problem was, I knew Brett's clients. I'd worked with most of them myself, and none of them had been at those restaurants on those dates. Sunday morning, I called my lawyer. Jennifer Walsh was a family law attorney who specialized in messy divorces. Rachel had recommended her, and her reputation was intimidating. She was known for being thorough, ruthless, and expensive. Exactly what I needed. So your wife is having an affair with her boss, who's also your boss, and they're using company funds to pay for their dates, she said, reviewing the notes I'd given her. That's actually pretty good for us. How so? Adultery is still a factor in Maryland divorce proceedings, especially when it involves marital misconduct. And if her affair is causing you problems at work, we can argue for additional damages. What kind of problems? Hostile work environment, damage to your professional reputation, potential impact on your career advancement. If people at your company are talking about your personal life, if you're being treated differently because of your wife's behavior, that's something we can use. I thought about the stares, the whispered conversations, the careful way my coworkers had been treating me. Yeah, that's definitely happening. Good. Now, about the expense account fraud. That's not directly relevant to the divorce, but it gives us leverage. If we threaten to expose that, it might encourage them to be more reasonable in settlement negotiations. I don't want to be reasonable. I want to make them pay. Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Alex, I understand you're angry, but revenge is expensive, and it's not always satisfying. Sometimes the best revenge is moving on and building a better life. With all due respect, Jennifer, you don't know what it's like to have your wife tell you she wants to see other men, then watch her parade around the office with her new boyfriend while everyone whispers about what a fool you are. You're right, I don't. But I know what it's like to watch clients destroy themselves pursuing payback. The question is, what do you actually want here? I thought about that for a moment. What did I want? I want them to face consequences. I want Brett to lose his job. I want Vanessa to understand that actions have repercussions. I want everyone who's been whispering about me to know that I'm not some pathetic cuckold who's going to roll over and take it. Okay, that's actionable, but we need to be smart about it. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a new sense of purpose. I'd spent Sunday evening preparing my documentation, photos from Tom, expense report copies, a timeline of Brett's questionable charges going back 6 months. But first, I wanted to see how far this had progressed. The answer became clear around 10 o'clock, when Brett Lane walked past my cubicle and stopped. Alex, he said, his voice carefully neutral. How are you holding up? I looked up from my computer. Brett was standing there in another expensive suit, his expression somewhere between concerned and smug, like he was offering condolences at a funeral he'd caused. I'm fine, Brett. Thanks for asking. Good, good. I know this is a difficult time for you. What's difficult about it? He shifted uncomfortably. Well, the separation. Vanessa mentioned you two are having some problems. Did she? I kept my voice level, professional. That's interesting. What else did Vanessa mention? Just that you're working through some issues. I hope you can resolve them. Oh, we're resolving them. Definitely resolving them. Something in my tone must have bothered him, because his fake concern slipped for a moment, and I saw something else underneath. Satisfaction, maybe even triumph. Well, he said, if you need some time off to deal with personal matters, I'm sure we can work something out. There it was. The subtle threat disguised as consideration. Take some time off, Alex. Get out of the way while I enjoy your wife and your colleagues' whisper about what a loser you are. That's very generous of you, Brett, but I'm exactly where I need to be. He nodded and walked away, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. He was wondering what I knew, what I was planning, whether I was going to be a problem. He was right to wonder. At lunch, instead of eating with Dave and the other engineers, I went to see Mr. Stein. Harold Stein was the founder and owner of Meridian Construction, a 70-year-old man who'd built the company from nothing and still came to work every day because he loved what he did. He was old school, direct, and had zero tolerance for bullshit. Alex, he said, looking up from his sandwich, what can I do for you? I need to report some concerns about expense account irregularities. His eyebrows went up. Harold took company money very seriously. What kind of irregularities? I laid out the documentation I'd prepared: photos, receipts, dates, and locations. I explained how Brett had been billing personal dinners as business expenses, how the supposed client meetings had no actual clients present, how company funds were being used to finance an extramarital affair. Harold studied the papers for a long time, his expression getting darker with each page. "This is your wife," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "And you're bringing this to me why? Revenge?" I'd expected that question. Because Brett Lane is stealing from the company, and as an employee, I have an obligation to report it. My personal situation doesn't change the fact that he's committing expense account fraud. Harold nodded slowly. "You're right. It doesn't." He gathered up the papers. "I'll need to investigate this properly. That means talking to accounting, reviewing credit card statements, possibly involving our legal department." "I understand. It also means Brett will know you reported him." I figured. This could get ugly, Alex. Office politics, retaliation, people taking sides. You sure you want to go down this road? I thought about Vanessa laughing with Brett at the rusty scupper, about the whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, about Brett's fake concern and subtle threats. "I'm sure." "Okay then. Give me 48 hours. I spent Tuesday watching Brett carefully. He seemed nervous, checking his phone constantly, having hushed conversations with Vanessa by the coffee machine. Word was getting around that Harold was asking questions about expense accounts, and Brett was smart enough to know that was bad news. Wednesday morning, Harold called Brett into his office. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When Brett came out, his face was pale, and his expensive suit looked rumpled. He walked straight to Vanessa's office and closed the door. I could hear raised voices, though I couldn't make out the words. An hour later, Vanessa appeared at my cubicle. "We need to talk," she said. "Do we?" "Alex, what did you do?" I looked up at her. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd been married to for 20 years. But she was also a stranger who'd chosen another man over me, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "I reported expense account fraud to the owner of the company. It's called doing my job. You're trying to get Brett fired." "I'm trying to make sure company funds aren't being used to pay for your dates." Her face flushed. "This is about revenge. This is about consequences. You wanted to explore your options, remember? Well, actions have consequences. Brett's about to learn that." "Harold's talking about termination." "Good." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "I never thought you were vindictive. I never thought you were a cheater. Guess we both learned something new." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the office floor. I watched her go, feeling something that might have been satisfaction or might have been sadness. It was hard to tell the difference anymore. Thursday afternoon, Harold called me into his office. "Brett Lane has been terminated," he said without preamble. "Effective immediately. Security's escorting him out now." Through Harold's window, I could see Brett at his desk, putting personal items into a cardboard box, while Big Mike from security watched. His face was red, and he was moving with the jerky motions of a man who was barely controlling his anger. "What about Vanessa?" I asked. "She's being transferred to our Annapolis office. Different department, different supervisor. HR thinks it's best to separate her from this situation." "That's it?" "She didn't violate company policy. Brett did. She's collateral damage." I watched Brett carry his box toward the elevator, his career at Meridian Construction over. 20 years with the company, gone because he couldn't keep his hands off another man's wife. "There's something else," Harold said. "Brett's threatening to sue for wrongful termination. Says this was really about your personal situation, not company policy." "Let him sue. The documentation speaks for itself." "It does. But Alex, this isn't over. Brett's got connections in the industry, and he's angry. Watch your back." I nodded and shook Harold's hand. "Thanks for handling this professionally." "Thank you for bringing it to my attention." Expense account fraud is serious business. As I walked back to my cubicle, I could feel eyes on me from all over the office. Some looked impressed, others looked wary, and a few looked downright hostile. I'd just gotten the regional director fired, and that was the kind of thing that made enemies. But I'd also shown everyone that Alex Foster wasn't going to be anyone's victim. That evening, Tom called with an update. Brett's been calling around to other construction companies trying to line up interviews, but word's getting out about why he was fired. Expense account fraud is a career killer in your industry. Good. There's more. Vanessa's been staying at her sister's place in Ellicott City. Apparently your house feels too empty without you there. She could have thought of that before she decided to start dating her boss. Alex, I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've seen a lot of marriages end badly. But I've never seen someone systematically destroy their spouse's lover's career as revenge. You sure you want to keep going down this road? I thought about that question as I sat in my empty apartment, eating takeout Chinese food and planning my next move. Was I sure? Brett Lane had lost his job, his reputation was damaged, and his marriage was probably in trouble when his wife found out about the affair. Vanessa was transferred to a different office, separated from her lover, and dealing with the consequences of her choices. Most people would call that enough revenge. But most people hadn't watched their wife hold hands with another man at the Rusty Scupper. Most people hadn't endured weeks of whispered conversations and pitying looks from their co-workers. Most people hadn't had their 20-year marriage destroyed by a woman who decided she wanted to feel alive again. I'm sure, I told Tom. This isn't over yet. Brett Lane's termination sent shockwaves through the Baltimore construction industry that I hadn't anticipated. By Friday morning, my phone was ringing with calls from former colleagues, competitors, and even a reporter from the Baltimore Business Journal who'd somehow gotten wind of the story. Alex Foster? This is Mike Chen from the Business Journal. I'm working on a story about executive misconduct in the construction industry. I understand you were involved in exposing expense account fraud at Meridian Construction? I hung up without answering. The last thing I needed was my personal situation splashed across the local business press. But the calls kept coming. Apparently, Brett had been more connected than I'd realized, and his sudden termination was causing ripples throughout the industry. Some people were calling to congratulate me for exposing fraud. Others were calling to warn me that I'd made powerful enemies. The most interesting call came from Dave Morrison, a project manager at Coleman Construction, one of Meridian's biggest competitors. Alex, I heard about what happened with Brett Lane. Look, I know this is personal for you, but you should know. He's been shopping around a story about you. Says you fabricated evidence to get him fired because he was dating your wife. That's bullshit. I know it is. I've worked with Brett before, and he's always been loose with expense accounts. But he's got friends in the industry, and some of them are listening to his version of events. What's his version? That you're an unstable, vindictive husband who couldn't handle your wife leaving you for a better man. That you used company resources to stalk them, then manufactured evidence to destroy his career. I felt my jaw clench. Even in defeat, Brett was trying to control the narrative, trying to make himself the victim and me the villain. Dave, I've got documentation going back 6 months. Receipts, photos, credit card statements. Brett Lane was stealing from the company long before I knew about the affair. I believe you, but not everyone will. Brett's charismatic, and he's good at making people see things his way. You need to be prepared for pushback. The pushback started Monday morning. I was reviewing structural plans for a new office building when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. Alex Foster. Mr. Foster, this is Julia Lane, Brett's wife. I sat up straighter. Brett's wife was calling me? This was unexpected. Mrs. Lane, I'm sorry for your situation. Are you? Her voice was cold, controlled. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you destroyed my husband's career out of spite. Your husband destroyed his own career by stealing company funds to pay for dates with my wife. That's your version. Brett says you've been harassing them for weeks, stalking them, trying to sabotage their relationship. I almost laughed. Mrs. Lane, your husband was having an affair with my wife. I reported his expense account fraud to my employer. Those are facts, not harassment. Brett made a mistake. But what you did was vindictive and calculated. You cost him his job, his reputation, his future in this industry. He cost himself those things when he decided to cheat on you. There was a long pause. Then, "This isn't over, Mr. Foster. Brett has lawyers and he has friends. You're going to regret what you've done." She hung up before I could respond. An hour later, Vanessa called. "Alex, we need to talk. In person." "I don't think that's a good idea. Brett's talking about suing you for defamation. He says you ruined his reputation with lies. Let him sue. Discovery should be interesting. This has gone too far. You got what you wanted. We're not together anymore. He lost his job. Can't you just let it go?" Let it go? I could hear the anger creeping into my voice. "Vanessa, you destroyed our marriage, humiliated me in front of our co-workers, and now you want me to let it go? I want you to stop trying to destroy everyone around me." "I haven't destroyed anyone. I reported a crime. Brett destroyed himself." "It wasn't a crime. It was a policy violation. It was theft. Company funds used for personal expenses. That's theft." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I'm filing for divorce." "Good. My lawyer will be in touch. Alex, it doesn't have to be ugly. We can divide things fairly, move on with our lives. You should have thought of that before you decided to start dating your boss. I thought you'd understand eventually. I thought you'd see that we weren't happy, that we both deserved better." "I was happy, Vanessa. You were the one who decided we deserved better. Or rather, you decided you deserved better. I was just collateral damage. That's not, it is exactly that. You made your choice. Now live with the consequences." I hung up and immediately called Jennifer Walsh. "Vanessa's filing for divorce," I told her. "Expected? Are you ready for this to get nasty?" "It's already nasty." "It's about to get nastier. Contested divorces bring out the worst in people, especially when there's adultery involved. And if Brett Lane is encouraging her to fight, this could drag on for months." "Let it drag on. I've got time and documentation." "Alex, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Are you doing this because you want a fair divorce settlement, or because you want to punish Vanessa and Brett?" I thought about that question. The honest answer was complicated. "Both," I said finally. "That's what I was afraid of. Look, I'm your lawyer and I'll represent your interests aggressively, but revenge is expensive and it's not always satisfying. Sometimes the best outcome is a clean break. We'll see." Tuesday brought new complications. I was eating lunch at my desk when Dave appeared with a concerned expression. "Alex, you need to know something. There's a rumor going around that you hired a private investigator to stalk Vanessa and Brett." I looked up from my sandwich. "Where'd you hear that?" "Karen in HR mentioned it to Steve's wife. Apparently, Vanessa told her that you've been having them followed, taking pictures, building some kind of dossier. I gathered evidence of expense account fraud. That's not stalking. I know that, but HR doesn't see it that way. Karen's been asking questions about whether you used company resources for personal business, whether you accessed Brett's expense reports without authorization." This was getting complicated. I'd used my legitimate access to review expense reports as part of my job duties, but HR might see it differently if they thought I was motivated by personal revenge rather than company interests. "Have they talked to Harold about this?" "Not yet, but Karen's building a file. She thinks you might have created a hostile work environment." "I created a hostile work environment? Brett was the one having an affair with an employee?" "Yeah, but Brett's gone. You're still here, and now you're the problem." I spent the rest of the day thinking about hostile work environments and company policies and the various ways a messy divorce could destroy my career along with my marriage. Wednesday morning, I got a call from Harold Stein's secretary asking me to come to his office immediately. Harold was sitting behind his desk with Karen from HR and a man I didn't recognize in an expensive suit. "Alex, this is David Chen, our corporate attorney. We need to discuss some concerns that have been brought to our attention." I sat down, trying to project calm confidence while my pulse quickened. "What kind of concerns?" Karen opened a file folder. "We've received allegations that you may have misused company resources for personal matters, specifically in gathering information about Brett Lane's expense account activities. I reported expense account fraud using information I had legitimate access to as part of my job duties. But your motivation was personal, wasn't it?" David Chen leaned forward. "You weren't concerned about company policy violations. You were angry about your wife's affair. My motivation doesn't change the fact that Brett was stealing company funds. But it does raise questions about your conduct," Karen said. "Using your position to gather information for personal reasons, creating a hostile work environment, potentially exposing the company to legal liability." I looked at Harold. "Are you seriously suggesting that reporting theft was somehow improper?" "Nobody's suggesting that," Harold said carefully. "But we need to make sure all of our procedures were followed correctly, especially if Brett decides to pursue legal action." "What kind of legal action?" David Chen answered. "Mr. Lane has retained counsel and is threatening to sue both you and the company for wrongful termination, defamation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. He's claiming that his termination was motivated by personal animus rather than legitimate business concerns." "That's ridiculous. The documentation is solid," Harold interrupted. "But Brett's lawyer is arguing that you manufactured or manipulated evidence because of your personal situation." "How could I manipulate credit card receipts and restaurant photos?" "They're claiming the photos were taken as part of stalking behavior, not legitimate investigation. They're saying you hired a private investigator to harass them." I felt the walls closing in. What had started as a simple case of expense account fraud was turning into a complex legal battle that could destroy my career. "So, what are you telling me?" Harold sighed. "We're telling you to be very careful. Don't contact Vanessa or Brett directly. Don't discuss this case with coworkers. Don't do anything that could be construed as harassment or retaliation. And if Brett sues, then we'll deal with it. But Alex, I need you to understand. If this becomes a prolonged legal battle, it's going to affect everyone. The company, your coworkers, your own career. Sometimes the smart play is to settle quietly and move on." I left Harold's office feeling like I'd been punched in the stomach. What had started as righteous anger about expense account fraud was turning into a career-threatening legal mess. Brett and Vanessa weren't just fighting back. They were trying to destroy me. That evening, I called Tom Brennan. "Tom, I need to know everything about Brett Lane. Not just the affair, not just the expense account stuff. Everything. His finances, his reputation, his vulnerabilities. If he wants to play hardball, I need ammunition." "Alex, this is starting to sound like you want to destroy the guy." "He's trying to destroy me first. Fair play." "What about Vanessa? What about her?" "You want me to dig up dirt on your wife too?" I thought about that. Vanessa had betrayed me, humiliated me, and was now apparently helping Brett build a case against me. Did I want to destroy her too? Focus on Brett for now, but Tom, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about revenge anymore. They're threatening my career, my reputation, my future. I can't just walk away. "Okay, but Alex, once we go down this road, there's no coming back. You sure you want to escalate this?" I thought about Harold's warnings, about Karen's file, about Brett's threats of legal action. I thought about 20 years of marriage destroyed by a woman who wanted to feel alive again, and a man who thought company funds were his personal entertainment budget. I'm sure. Let's finish this. Tom's investigation into Brett Lane's background took 2 weeks and uncovered more than I'd expected. We met at the same diner in Cockeysville on a gray November morning, and Tom spread a manila folder across the table like he was dealing cards. Brett Lane is not the successful businessman he pretends to be, Tom said, stirring sugar into his coffee. Guy's got serious financial problems. What kind of problems? Mortgage on that fancy townhouse is 3 months behind. Both kids' private school tuition is overdue. He's got credit card debt north of $60,000 and a car loan on that Range Rover he can't afford. I studied the financial documents Tom had somehow obtained. How was he managing all this? That's the interesting part. His salary at Meridian was good, but not good enough to support his lifestyle. I think he's been supplementing his income. How? Side consulting work, some of it with companies that bid on Meridian projects. Potential conflict of interest, maybe even kickbacks. This was bigger than expense account fraud. If Brett had been taking money from contractors while making decisions about Meridian projects, that was serious corruption. You have proof? Bank deposits that don't match his salary, consulting agreements with companies that won bids he influenced, payments that coincide with project awards. It's circumstantial, but it's a pattern. I leaned back in the booth. Brett Lane wasn't just a cheating husband and expense account thief. He was potentially a corrupt businessman who'd been stealing from Meridian in multiple ways. There's more, Tom said. His wife filed for legal separation last week. She's claiming abandonment and seeking full custody of the kids. Because of the affair? Because he moved out and stopped paying the bills. Apparently, losing his job at Meridian triggered a financial collapse. Julia Lane is protecting herself and the children. So Brett's marriage was over, his finances were in ruins, and his reputation in the construction industry was destroyed. The affair with Vanessa had cost him everything. What about Vanessa? Still staying with her sister in Ellicott City. She's been looking for work, but word's gotten around about the affair. HR managers talk to each other, and nobody wants to hire someone with a reputation for dating the boss. So she's unemployed? Effectively. Meridian's keeping her on payroll through the end of the year, but she's been sidelined. No real responsibilities, no advancement opportunities. They're hoping she'll quit. I felt a complex mix of satisfaction and sadness. Vanessa was facing consequences for her choices, but she was still the woman I'd been married to for 20 years. Part of me wanted her to suffer, but part of me just wanted this whole mess to be over. Tom, I need you to do something else. I want you to set up a meeting with Brett. That's not a good idea, Alex. The guy's desperate, his life is falling apart, and he blames you for everything. Desperate people do stupid things. That's exactly why I want to meet with him. Desperate people make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that end this whole situation once and for all. Tom stared at me for a long moment. What are you planning? I'm planning to give Brett Lane exactly what he deserves. The meeting was set for Friday evening at a bar called Murphy's Pub in downtown Baltimore. It was the kind of place where construction workers went after long days with dim lighting, cheap beer, and enough ambient noise to cover private conversations. I arrived first and chose a table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard. Brett showed up 20 minutes later, looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in the past month. His expensive suits were gone, replaced by jeans and a rumpled button-down shirt. His perfectly styled hair was unkempt, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He looked like what he was, a man whose life had fallen apart. Alex, he said, sliding into the chair across from me. Thanks for agreeing to meet. Brett. The waitress came over, and Brett ordered a double whiskey. I stuck with beer. Look, Brett said once she was gone, I know we've got problems, but maybe we can work something out. What kind of problems do you think we have, Brett? You cost me my job. You destroyed my reputation. You turned my wife against me. I reported expense account fraud. Your wife left you because you were cheating on her. Your reputation destroyed itself. He leaned forward, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. He'd been drinking before he got here. You hired a private investigator to stalk us. You manipulated evidence. You turned a simple policy violation into a federal case because you couldn't handle your wife choosing a better man. A better man? I laughed. Brett, you're 3 months behind on your mortgage, your kid's school is threatening to kick them out for non-payment, and your wife filed for separation. You're not a better man. You're a broke, corrupt loser who destroyed his own life chasing after someone else's wife. His face flushed red. You don't know what you're talking about. I know about the consulting fees from Morrison Construction. I know about the payments from Atlantic Building Supply. I know you've been taking kickbacks from contractors for years. Brett went very still. You can't prove that. Bank records, consulting agreements, payment schedules that coincide with project awards. It's all there, Brett. You weren't just stealing from Meridian with your expense account. You were selling the company's interest to the highest bidder. That's not... It's exactly that. And if you don't drop this lawsuit threat, if you don't stop spreading lies about me, I'm going to hand everything over to the FBI. Brett stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him calculating odds, weighing options, trying to figure out how much I actually knew versus how much I was bluffing. What do you want? He said finally. I want you to disappear. I want you to drop any legal action against me or Meridian. I want you to stop telling people that I fabricated evidence or harassed you. I want you to take responsibility for your own choices and leave me alone. And if I do that, then I keep the corruption evidence to myself. You slink away quietly, and maybe you can rebuild your life somewhere else. And if I don't? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo Tom had taken. Brett accepting an envelope from a Morrison Construction executive in the parking lot of a restaurant. Then I destroy you completely. Criminal charges, federal investigation, prison time, your choice. Brett stared at the photo, and I could see the fight go out of him. He was beaten, and he knew it. You really hate me, don't you? I don't hate you, Brett. I just think you should face consequences for your actions. And Vanessa? What about her? What about her? You're destroying her life too. She can't find work, she's lost all her friends, she's living with her sister because she can't afford her own place. That's not my problem. She made her choices. She loved you, Alex. For 20 years she loved you, but you took her for granted, ignored her, made her feel invisible. All she wanted was to feel alive again. I looked at this broken man across from me, this cheater and thief and liar who was trying to justify destroying my marriage. Brett, if Vanessa was unhappy, she should have talked to me. If she wanted counseling, we could have tried counseling. If she wanted a divorce, she could have asked for a divorce. What she shouldn't have done was start an affair with her married boss while lying to my face about it. People make mistakes, and people face consequences for their mistakes. That's how the world works. Brett finished his whiskey and stood up. Okay, Alex, you win. I'll drop the lawsuit threat. I'll stop talking to people about you. I'll disappear. Good choice. But I want you to know something. Destroying me won't bring Vanessa back. It won't make your marriage work. It won't make you happy. Maybe not, but it'll make me feel better. Brett walked away without another word, leaving me alone at the table with my beer and my victory. I should have felt satisfied, triumphant, vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. My phone buzzed. Text message from Vanessa. Brett told me about your meeting. This has to stop, Alex. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. The next morning, I got a call from Jennifer Walsh. Brett Lane's attorney called. They're withdrawing all threats of legal action. Apparently, your husband-to-be ex-wife has decided to pursue other options. Good. Alex, what did you say to him? I explained the situation in terms he could understand. Should I ask what kind of leverage you used? Probably better if you don't. Okay. Well, this clears the way for a straightforward divorce proceeding. Vanessa's attorney is talking about an uncontested settlement. What are they offering? Standard division of assets, no alimony, clean break. It's actually pretty reasonable. I thought about that. A clean break. No more lawyers, no more investigations, no more revenge plots, just sign some papers and move on with my life. I'll think about it. Alex, this is a good deal. Take it. But I wasn't ready to take it. Not yet. That afternoon, I drove to Ellicott City to see Vanessa. Her sister's house was a modest colonial in an older neighborhood, the kind of place where people raised families and stayed for decades. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, trying to decide what I wanted to say. Finally, I walked up to the front door and rang the bell. Vanessa answered, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. She looked tired, older, like the past month had aged her in ways that couldn't be measured in days. Alex, I wasn't sure you'd come. Can we talk? She nodded and led me to the back porch, where we sat in wicker chairs and looked out at her sister's small garden. Brett told me what you have on him, she said. Did he? The corruption, the kickbacks, all of it. He's scared, Alex. Really scared. He should be. Is it true? Was he really taking money from contractors? What do you think? She was quiet for a moment. I think I didn't know him as well as I thought I did. None of us did. Alex, I need you to understand something. When I started seeing Brett, I thought he was successful, stable, everything you weren't giving me. I didn't know about the financial problems, the corruption, any of it. Would it have mattered if you had known? She considered that. I don't know. Maybe not. I was so unhappy, so desperate to feel something different. You could have talked to me. I tried. For years I tried. But you were always working, always focused on the next project, the next deadline. I felt like I was invisible. So you decided to have an affair. I decided to remember what it felt like to be desired. We sat in silence for a while, watching birds in the garden, both of us thinking about 20 years of marriage and how it had come to this. What happens now? She asked. Now we get divorced. You move on with your life, I move on with mine. And Brett? Brett disappears, hopefully forever. Alex, he's talking about leaving Maryland, starting over somewhere else. Good. His kids will barely see him. His wife hates him. He's lost everything. He brought that on himself. Did he? Or did you destroy him because you couldn't handle losing me to another man? I looked at her. This woman I'd loved for 20 years, who'd betrayed me and humiliated me and was now trying to make me feel guilty for defending myself. Vanessa, Brett Lane stole from our company. He cheated on his wife. He helped you cheat on me. He got exactly what he deserved. And what about me? What do I deserve? You deserve the consequences of your choices, just like everyone else. She started crying then, quietly, without drama. Just tears running down her cheeks as she stared out at the garden. I'm sorry, Alex, for all of it, for hurting you, for lying to you, for throwing away 20 years of marriage. I'm sorry. I wanted to comfort her, to tell her it was okay, to somehow make this easier for both of us. But I couldn't. The hurt was too deep, the betrayal too complete. I know you are, I said. But sorry doesn't fix this. No, it doesn't. I stood up to leave. Jennifer says you're offering a reasonable settlement. I'll probably take it. Thank you. Don't thank me, Vanessa. Just sign the papers and let's end this. I walked back to my car, leaving her crying on her sister's porch. As I drove away, I felt something that might have been closure or might have been just exhaustion. Either way, it was over. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new apartment in Hunt Valley, reading the Baltimore Business Journal over my morning coffee. There was a small item on page 3 about a former Meridian construction executive who'd been arrested in Phoenix on charges of contractor fraud and embezzlement. Brett Lane had tried to start over in Arizona, but his past had caught up with him. Apparently, the FBI had been investigating construction corruption in the Southwest, and Brett's name had come up in connection with several suspicious contracts. I felt a moment of satisfaction, then folded the paper and got ready for work. I had a bridge inspection scheduled for that morning and a cost estimate due by Friday. Normal work, the kind of thing that actually mattered. My phone rang as I was putting on my jacket. Unknown number. Alex Foster. Mr. Foster, this is Detective Sarah Martinez with the Baltimore County Police. I'm investigating some irregularities in the financial records of Brett Lane, and I understand you may have information relevant to our case. I sat down heavily. Even in prison in Arizona, Brett was still causing problems. What kind of information? Records of potential kickbacks and contractor fraud during his time at Meridian Construction. We have reason to believe his corruption may have extended beyond what was previously discovered. I thought about the files Tom had compiled, the evidence of Brett's various schemes, the documentation that had ended his career and driven him out of Maryland. Detective, I think we should meet. When would be convenient for you? How about now? 2 hours later, I was sitting in an interview room at the Baltimore County Police Department, handing over copies of every document Tom had gathered about Brett Lane's corruption. Detective Martinez reviewed the files with the focused attention of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for. This is very helpful, Mr. Foster. We've been building a case against several construction executives, and Mr. Lane appears to have been a key player in a larger conspiracy. What kind of conspiracy? Bid rigging, kickbacks, fraudulent billing, millions of dollars in public construction projects that were awarded based on bribes rather than merit. I thought about all the bridges and buildings and roads that Brett had influenced during his years at Meridian, all the projects where he might have sold his integrity for cash payments. How long has this been going on? We think at least 5 years, maybe longer. Mr. Lane was just one part of a network that included contractors, suppliers, and other construction executives. And now? Now we're going to prosecute all of them. Mr. Lane is already facing charges in Arizona, but we'll be adding federal corruption charges that could put him away for decades. I left the police station feeling something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, but a kind of grim justice. Brett Lane hadn't just destroyed my marriage and stolen from my company. He'd been part of a larger corruption scheme that had cheated taxpayers and undermined the integrity of public construction projects. My revenge had been personal, but it had also exposed real crimes that needed to be prosecuted. That evening, I called Tom Brennan. Saw the news about Brett Lane getting arrested in Arizona, he said. Guess your information was more valuable than we thought. Guess so. You feel good about it? I thought about that question. Did I feel good about Brett's arrest? About his impending prosecution? About the fact that his life was completely destroyed? I feel like justice was served, I said finally. And Vanessa? What about her? You two are officially divorced now. She's moved back to Baltimore, found a job with a nonprofit. Word is, she's trying to rebuild her life. Good for her. You ever think about reaching out, trying to make peace? I thought about Vanessa crying on her sister's porch, about 20 years of marriage reduced to legal documents and property division. I thought about forgiveness and moving on and all the things that normal people do after their marriages end. No, I said. Some bridges, once you burn them, stay burned. Fair enough. What about you? What's next? Next, I focus on my work, my life, my future. I build things that last and try not to think about things that don't. Sounds like a plan. I hung up and poured myself a bourbon, then sat on my balcony overlooking the Hunt Valley Hills. It was a clear night, and I could see the lights of Baltimore in the distance, all those people living their lives and making their choices and dealing with the consequences. Somewhere out there, Vanessa was probably having dinner alone, thinking about the marriage she'd destroyed and the life she was trying to rebuild. Somewhere in an Arizona prison, Brett Lane was facing the reality of federal corruption charges, and a future that looked nothing like the success he'd once imagined. And here I was, 45 years old, divorced, alone, but somehow at peace with the choices I'd made and the revenge I'd taken. I raised my glass to the Baltimore skyline and whispered, "To consequences." Then I went inside, turned off the lights, and went to sleep in my